I did want to answer just briefly, just to get people's minds moving, I suppose. When people ask why we don't talk more about God's punishment and hell and all these other things, because in the first place, the younger generation aren't the least bit afraid of those things, and it doesn't mean a great deal. And secondly, because people always misunderstand what we're talking about. We have a kind of pagan idea or Latin idea of what hell is, because people think that there's a big, fiery pit that God created where He's going to send people who irritate Him or get on His nerves during this life. And there's nothing like that. It's not what the Holy Fathers have taught us. Hell is really a psychological condition of our own. And St. Basil the Great tells us that when we have the icon of Christ, the Ancient of Days, there's a river of fire that comes from the feet. And St. Basil the Great explains that the river of fire is both heaven and hell, because it's the fire of the glory of God and the fire of His love. And that how your conscience receives the fire is heaven and hell for you. That should frighten people quite enough, because the fire has a capacity of giving light and warmth, and it has a capacity of burning. And St. Abba Isaac the Syrian, St. Abba Ephraim the Syrian, have explained also to us that St. Isaac says there's no sin greater than the sin against love. And no sin burns more deeply than the sin against love. So that even when a friend betrays a friend, if you have somebody who you consider to be your best friend or your closest friend, and they betray you, it hurts so deeply. Or if a husband and wife suddenly turn against each other when they loved each other before, and then it burns very deeply. And to reject or sin against the love of Jesus Christ, it burns us more deeply than anything that we could possibly think of. And when our Lord Jesus Christ talks about the worms that never die, He's talking about the kind of passions that you keep in your mind and you nurse them. Instead of trying to struggle against them, you keep them there. So imagine if you really, really felt you hated somebody with a real passion, and you take that with you into all eternity, and you can't get rid of it now. It's there forever. And it's going to continue to burn you forever. And that's what He meant by the worm that never dies. It's these passions that we take into ourselves, and we don't try to struggle against them. And I use hatred because there are very few things that burn us inside ourselves more deeply than to think that we hate someone. That wounds our own soul and our own heart and cripples us. It emotionally cripples us to have hatred. And of course it hurts the person that you direct the hatred toward, but it really destroys you yourself. And we have to understand really when we talk about hell, it's something we create ourselves in this life, in our own minds. St. Mark of Ephesus reminds us that hell doesn't exist and can't exist until the second coming of Christ, because nobody's separated and nobody's divided from Christ. So if we were going to talk about hell and condemnation and all those things, we would really have to talk about our own personal behavior. And a lot of it still comes down to the fact that it's our personal behavior toward other people that is the real problem for us. Every problem that we call sin, if somebody asks me, how can you tell if something is a sin or is not a sin? And there's no absolute rule, but we say in English a rule of thumb, that one thing you can measure it by. Anything you do that's self-centered, self-loving, or egotistical is automatically sin. Even if you're doing something good from self-love or from ego, it's still a sin, because sin means to misuse your energies or to separate yourself from God and from others. So everything that's egotistical or self-loving is sin. If something is completely unselfish, well, there's a good chance that it's not sin, because it's completely unselfish. That it might be, but usually it's not if it's unselfish. If we look at the Ten Commandments again, it's okay to fulfill them because it's a law, and we're afraid of the law. We don't talk on our cell phone anymore when we're driving because we're afraid. We didn't care if we killed somebody before, but now that it's going to cost us money, now we don't do it anymore. If it was just to save somebody's life, forget it, we'd do it. But if it's going to cost us money, well, we're afraid now. But this is part of the problem, isn't it? We fulfill the law because we're afraid of punishment. And if the punishment wasn't there, does that mean we would go ahead and do all these things? We would steal and kill and everything if there was no punishment? So the reason we're keeping the law that way is for self-interest, because of our own ego. We don't want to get punished. When we learn how to fulfill the law out of love, then it has moral value. As long as we're fulfilling it from fear, it has no moral value. It's good, but it has no moral value because we're doing it for our own self-interest. We don't want to be punished. And, you see sometimes in traffic, well, especially women, because men seldom put eyeshadow on, but you see a woman driving with her knees. She's talking on the cell phone and putting eyeshadow or lipstick on at the same time. And so maybe she's going to kill somebody that way. But it doesn't matter. But if you tell her she's going to get a $1,000 fine if she's caught doing it, then she'll stop doing it. That's what I mean. If you tell somebody to follow one of the Ten Commandments, otherwise you'll get punished. Okay, I don't want to get punished, so I'll do it, but I'd really like to do it anyway. But so when you learn how to fulfill it out of love, because you don't steal from your neighbor because it would hurt your neighbor, and you don't want to hurt your neighbor because you love your neighbor, you care for him. The last of the Ten Commandments, and the longest one still, is don't be jealous of your neighbor for the things that they have. Don't desire to take them from them. And that means that you love your neighbor enough that when he has, when he drives up in his new sports car, instead of saying, I'd really like to have a sports car, I'm glad my neighbor has it because I love my neighbor and it gives him joy, so I'm glad he has it. That's what we're actually striving for. So when we talk about, sometimes we get so abstract, our temptations are out here someplace and our morality is out here someplace, and it's some rules or regulations, or the devil's out here tempting us. And we take it outside of ourselves so much that it can't touch our heart anymore. And we have to bring these things in so they actually touch our heart. What we're really struggling for is to transform or change our own heart into the image of Christ. And so when we think that we're just struggling just to be good and say, this is bad, this is good, God likes this, God doesn't like this, that doesn't mean anything. And it means even less to the younger generations. In a simpler society and culture, sometimes those things could actually mean something. But the other thing is that people need to know the reasons for things. They need to know why. We say that blind faith is not faith. Blind faith is just some kind of obsession or obedience. We need to have some idea of why we're doing things. There are great mysteries in life. All of life is a mystery. The universe is a mystery. Each individual is a mystery to themselves and a mystery in general. And nevertheless, why should we follow a certain course of action? Why should we do this and not this? Why is it okay for some people to do this but not okay for me to do this? So there are all these things we have to know the meaning for it. And the younger generation especially want to know why and what is the meaning. And they're right, really. The other thing is that we have to be very careful that we don't just have religion. Because terrible and evil things are done in this world in the name of religion. Some of the worst deeds and catastrophes in all of history are done for the sake of religion. But we're supposed to have faith and not religion. Religion is just a kind of tribalism. And when we say we're Orthodox Christians, does that mean we simply belong to a tribe called Orthodox Christian? That's our religion? Or does it mean that we have an Orthodox Christian faith, that we understand the gospel of Christ and we try to live it in a